I'm Hope Northagen. Thanks for tuning in to NFN. Tonight we will be talking about the independence of Brazil from Portugal. First, a little bit of history. Hope? Thanks, Hope. Now, Brazil is rich in natural resources like coffee beans, sugarcane, and various fruits. This is very attractive to colonizers. So when the Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494 established that South America be split up, Spain and Portugal wanted to take advantage of it. So they split up Brazil. Now Portugal, seeing that sugarcane was booming in Brazil, they established sugarcane plantations using the natives as slaves. But since the natives weren't immune to any of the diseases that the Europeans brought, they died. So the Portuguese were forced to ship in African slaves to maintain their sugar plantations. During this time, the Portuguese were fighting against the Dutch, and the Dutch wanted to take advantage of Brazil as well. So they went and invaded, but the Portuguese kicked them out. And soon after, the Treaty of Madrid in 1750 stated that Portugal would take the rest of Brazil from Spain. Now, Portugal wanted money, so King John traded with Britain because trade brings in money. But this made the French angry, so they sent Napoleon to kill King John. But King John wanted to continue his reign in Portugal, so he fled to Brazil, his colony, but he didn't want it to seem like he was fleeing, so he just framed it as him visiting his colony. But when Napoleon was killed, the Portuguese said, "Hey, I want my king back." So he left his son, Prince Dom Pedro, to look after Brazil. This caused problems. Hope? Thanks for that historical recap. Now to present day. Thanks, Hope. Now, since King John had left Brazil, he left his son, Prince Dom Pedro, in charge, who was the monarch. Now, as the monarch, he was in charge of making political and militaristic advances, but he was being pressured by General George Aviler, who forced him to make decisions he didn't want to do, like banishing ministers. Now this made Pedro feel bad because he had earned the trust of those ministers, and he swore to never give in to manipulation ever again. But power was already being stripped from him. He became a joke. This ridicule from the Portuguese shifted his loyalties from Portugal to Brazil. Now at the same time, the Brazilians had convinced themselves that since King John had visited Brazil, that was a representation of becoming a state of Portugal instead of just a colony. So they wanted to be represented in the parliament. Portugal was amused, and they said, "Sure, send some representatives from Brazil." But outside of Parliament, they were harassed, and inside of Parliament, they were unable to speak or share thoughts and opinions on subjects at hand. Upon hearing this, Dom Pedro decided that was the last straw. So he cut all ties with Portugal, and declared independence in the fall of 1822. The symbolic representation of this new independence was Dom Pedro stating and telling all of his close friends to take off their blue and white armbands and replace them with bands that symbolized Brazil. Now, let's get a closer look. Thanks, Hope. I'm on the ground in Brazil, witnessing the heart of this economy. Sugarcane plantations. Now, sir, you're a sugarcane plantation owner, aren't you? I sure am. Can you tell me the effect that Dom Pedro declaring independence for Brazil has had on your plantation life? Well, you see, I've been a plantation owner my entire life. And before the Declaration of Independence for Brazil, I was just growing sugarcane, harvesting sugarcane, selling sugarcane, getting not very much money, because Portugal takes a lot of it through taxes. But now that Prince Dom Pedro has declared independence for Brazil, I'm thinking I'm gonna get a lot more money for my sugar. It's high quality, you know? That's very interesting. Can you tell me a little bit more about how your plantation runs? Well, I sure can. My plantation is run by the finest of men. And they give me lots of crops every year. My soil is rich, and I have them planted, and I have them harvested, and I feed them, and I give them shelter. And now that we're free from Portugal, well, I really support Dom Pedro for doing that for us, because it wasn't a very good situation we was in. Thank you for that. Back to you. Thanks for that insight. Now to Hope Northagen to hear about present-day Brazil. Thanks, Hope. Now, present-day Brazil is still a slave-based plantation economy with little political involvement. But after Dom Pedro declared independence, he was coronated, and he split the government into a two-party system, conservatives and liberals, mirroring Britain's government. This was stable until the 1880s, until military demands were not met, and people were pushing for emancipation of the slaves. At the same time, the economy dropped as international demand switched from sugarcane to coffee beans. Now, back to Hope for a prognosis. Thanks, Hope. Today, Brazil looks like it's in for a rough couple of years with switching from sugarcane exportation to coffee bean exportation. But looking at our past, from the 16th century into the 18th century, there was a boom of sugarcane exportation. Then a dip in the economy as the international demand switched from sugarcane to minerals. And in the 18th century, minerals such as gold and diamonds was a boom for the economy. And now we're switching from these minerals and sugarcane to a boom of coffee bean exportation. So we expect that the next few years will be rough as our plantation owners switch from growing sugarcane to growing coffee beans. But it'll look up. We have a bright future. We expect the emancipation of slaves, which will also take a dip on the economy because plantation owners will start having to pay for work and maybe even do manual work themselves. And we expect a coronation for the new Prince of Brazil. The future looks bright. This is Hope Northagen, where we relay the facts, share only the truth. Thanks for watching, and have a good night. NFN.